It's hard to know where to begin when your whole world falls apart. I guess the day it started, the day everything really changed, was when I got the news. Cancer. The word itself felt like a punch to the gut. You don't ever think it's going to happen to you, you know? You hear about other people getting sick, but you never imagine it'll be your turn. I still remember sitting in that sterile doctor's office, the white walls closing in on me as he said it. Stage 2 lymphoma. It didn't feel real. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just nodded like I was listening to a weather report or something. It was like I'd left my body in that moment. Adele was there, sitting beside me, holding my hand. She had this concerned look on her face, all teary-eyed and whispering words like, "We'll get through this," and "I'm here for you." And at first, I believed her. Why wouldn't I? We'd been married for over a decade, and sure, things had their ups and downs, but we were solid, right? At least I thought we were. The first few weeks after the diagnosis were a blur of doctor's appointments, consultations, and preparing for treatment. Surgery was on the horizon, followed by chemo. I wasn't prepared for how fast everything would go downhill. I don't just mean physically, although trust me, that was its own kind of hell, but everything else too. Our relationship. It's like the minute I got sick, Adele started to drift. Not that I noticed right away. At first, I was too wrapped up in my own pain and exhaustion. The chemo hits you hard, drains every bit of energy you have. My body became a battleground, and every day was a fight to get through the nausea, the weakness, the fucking despair. I'm not gonna lie, our sex life took a massive hit. I barely had the strength to get out of bed, let alone be intimate. And I knew she noticed. We used to be all over each other, man. I'm talking like, couldn't keep our hands off each other in the early years. That passion doesn't last forever, but still, we had a good thing going in that department. Until cancer came in and stole whatever was left of that. It wasn't just sex, though. It was everything. Emotionally, physically, I was a shell of myself. And instead of stepping up, Adele started spending more and more time away. She'd tell me she had to stay late at work or that she was grabbing drinks with friends. At first, I bought it. Why wouldn't I? I mean, she had her own life, too. She wasn't the one who was sick. I didn't want to drag her down into the pit I was in. But as time went on, I started noticing little things. Her phone was always glued to her hand. She'd get these texts, and I'd ask who it was, and she'd brush it off. Just work or just a friend. But something felt off, you know? The turning point came when Harold showed up. Now, Harold's an old acquaintance. We weren't super close or anything, but we go way back. Haven't seen the guy in years, and out of the blue, he drops by. At first, we're just shooting the shit, talking about life, catching up. He knows about the cancer, of course. Everybody does. Then, out of nowhere, he drops this bomb on me. He's like, "Elliot, man, I don't know how to say this, but I've been hearing things about Adele." I'll never forget the way my stomach dropped when he said that. "What do you mean?" I asked him, trying to keep my voice steady. Inside, I was already spiraling. He started rambling about rumors about seeing her out with some guy a couple of times. Said he didn't want to believe it, didn't want to say anything, but felt like I should know. I tried to brush it off. Told him he was mistaken, but fuck, that seed of doubt was already planted deep. I couldn't unhear it. After Harold left, I sat there, staring at the ceiling for hours. I didn't want to believe him. I couldn't. She was my wife. We were supposed to be in this together, weren't we? I was battling fucking cancer, for God's sake. How could she do something like that to me? But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. All the nights she didn't come home until late, all the excuses, the sudden obsession with her appearance, like hitting the gym more often, buying new clothes. It's like everything clicked in that one moment, and I couldn't stop myself from imagining the worst. I didn't confront her right away. I couldn't. I was still too sick, too drained both physically and mentally. But I started watching her more closely. The way she acted when she thought I wasn't looking, the way she guarded her phone like it was some kind of treasure chest. My mind was racing, constantly coming up with scenarios. Was she really cheating? Or was this all in my head? Just some sick byproduct of the chemo and stress? In the end, I couldn't stand it anymore. The doubt was eating me alive, almost as much as the cancer. I didn't have the energy for some big confrontation, not yet. But I knew I had to find out the truth. That's when I decided to call a private investigator. Yeah, I know it sounds extreme, But at that point, I didn't trust her, and I needed answers. Enter Marcus. This guy was a real pro. Seasoned, calm, and honestly a little too good at digging up dirt. I told him everything. About Adele's sudden absences, the late nights, Harold's warning. Marcus didn't ask too many questions. He just nodded and told me to sit tight, that he'd take care of it. And that's where I'll leave it for now. I still didn't have proof. I still wanted to believe that I was wrong, that maybe Harold had it all twisted. But deep down, man, I knew. I just didn't want to admit it yet. Maybe I wasn't ready for the truth. After Harold's visit, everything changed. I tried to brush off what he said, tried to convince myself that it was just some misunderstanding. But that seed of doubt he planted, man, it took root. It was like I couldn't unsee the things that had always been there, but I never paid attention to. Suddenly, every little thing Adele did seemed suspicious. It was as if my mind had been rewired to constantly analyze her actions, her words, her absences. She was out more often. I'd ask her where she was going, and she'd give me the same answers. Work meetings, catching up with friends, or some other bullshit excuse that, once upon a time, I would have accepted without question. Now, every time she left, my stomach twisted into knots, my head racing with scenarios of what she was really doing. I started paying more attention to her phone. She was glued to it, always texting someone, always busy. And if I asked who it was, she'd brush it off. Just work, she'd say with that fake smile. But I knew something was off. It all came to a head one night during one of my chemo sessions. I was in the hospital, feeling like absolute shit, my body barely holding it together. The drugs were running through my veins, and I could feel my energy draining away with every passing second. I tried calling Adele, just wanted to hear her voice, needing some sort of comfort. But she didn't answer. The call went straight to voicemail. I tried again. Nothing. I waited, staring at my phone, hoping for a text, a missed call, anything. An hour passed. Then two. When I finally got a hold of her, she sounded annoyed. "I'm busy, Elliot. I told you I'd be out tonight," she said. Busy? I was fighting for my fucking life, and she was too busy to answer her phone? That was the moment I knew. She wasn't just distracted. She wasn't just overwhelmed by my illness. Something else was going on. After that night, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know the truth, no matter how much it hurt. I called Marcus, the private investigator I mentioned before. This guy came highly recommended, someone who specialized in marital infidelity. When I met him, I could tell right away he was a no-nonsense kind of guy. He sat across from me, stone-faced, as I poured out everything I'd been dealing with. Harold's warning, the late nights, the cold distance between us. Marcus didn't show much emotion. He just listened, then assured me that if there was something to find, he'd find it. He told me to go on like nothing had changed. "Don't tip her off," he said. "The last thing you want is for her to know you're on to her. Just keep things normal while I dig around." So, that's what I did. I played the part of the clueless, sick husband while Marcus worked in the background. But it wasn't easy. Every time Adele left the house, I'd watch her walk out the door, wondering if this was it, if she was going to meet him. And it wasn't just the thought of her with someone else that killed me. It was the fact that she could do this while I was going through the hardest battle of my life. That level of betrayal, that kind of coldness, it breaks something in you. The days dragged on. I was still going through treatment, still fighting the cancer, but my focus was somewhere else. My mind was split between surviving and finding out the truth. It was like I was living in two hells at once. And then, after what felt like an eternity, Marcus called. "We need to meet," he said, his voice calm and professional as always. My heart sank. This was it. When we met, Marcus didn't sugarcoat anything. He laid it all out in front of me like a courtroom exhibit, photos, reports, timelines. Adele had been seeing someone else. His name was Nathan, a married businessman she met through work. They'd been meeting up at a hotel. Usually on the nights, she claimed she was working late or out with friends. I stared at the photos in front of me. There she was, my wife, walking into some mid-tier hotel with another man, smiling like she didn't have a care in the world. And there he was, Nathan, some suit-and-tie asshole who probably thought he was above the rules because he had money. My blood boiled. I wanted to rip those photos in half, burn them, anything to make it go away. But I couldn't. This was my reality now. My wife was cheating on me while I was fighting for my life. Marcus kept talking, giving me details I didn't want to hear but knew I needed to. Nathan was married, too, had a wife and kids. They'd been sneaking around for months, maybe longer. Marcus didn't know exactly when it started, but the trail went back far enough to make me sick to my stomach. I didn't know what to do at first. Part of me wanted to confront her right then and there, scream at her, demand answers. But Marcus told me to hold off. "Let me keep digging," he said. "There might be more." More? I couldn't even wrap my head around what he'd already found. And now he was telling me there might be more? I felt like I was going to explode. But Marcus was right. If Adele was capable of this, who knew what else she was hiding? I had to be smart about it. I had to gather all the evidence before I made my move. So I did what Marcus said. I stayed quiet, kept pretending like nothing had changed. But inside, I was crumbling. Every time Adele walked through the door, I had to bite my tongue, had to stop myself from calling her out on her lies. I'd watch her laugh, joke, go about her day like everything was fine. And it took everything in me not to lose it. I started thinking about all the times I'd needed her, during chemo, when I could barely lift my head off the pillow, when I was too weak to move. She hadn't been there. Not really. She'd been busy. Now I knew what she'd really been doing, and it made me sick to think I'd ever believed her excuses. But I wasn't done. Not yet. I needed more. I needed to know just how deep her betrayal went. So, I waited. Marcus kept digging, and I kept pretending, and the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this wasn't just about her cheating. It was about survival. I was fighting for my life in more ways than one, and I wasn't going to let her win. Not yet. But the worst part? I still loved her. Or at least I loved the version of her I thought I knew. The woman I married, the woman who was supposed to stand by me through sickness and health. But that woman was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. And I had no idea what was coming next. All I knew was that I had to be ready. I thought finding out about Nathan would be the end of it. I mean, how much worse could it get, right? You find out your wife is screwing some rich, married businessman. And that's the bottom of the barrel, isn't it? But no, I was wrong. Dead wrong. Because as it turns out, Nathan wasn't the only one. Marcus called me a couple of weeks after the first meeting. I'd been trying to hold it together since then, barely making it through my days. Chemo was still kicking my ass, and mentally, I was walking around in a fog. Knowing that Adele had been sneaking off to hotels with another man while I was puking my guts out in a hospital bed, it did something to me. Broke something inside that I'm not sure will ever heal. So when Marcus called, I was already on edge. He said we needed to meet in person again, that there was more he needed to share with me. More? I asked, feeling that familiar dread wash over me. But I knew Marcus. If he said he had something, then it wasn't good. We met at the same place, a quiet cafe where nobody would bother us. Marcus sat down, same calm expression on his face, and slid a folder across the table. "There's more," he said, confirming my worst fear. I didn't even want to open it, but I knew I had to. The first thing I saw was a photo of Adele with another man. But this guy wasn't Nathan. No, this was someone else, some buff, douchey-looking guy in workout clothes. "His name's Derek," Marcus said. "He's a fitness trainer at the gym your wife's been going to. They've been seeing each other for months. It's more than just the gym. They've been meeting up at his apartment, too." I couldn't fucking believe it. A gym trainer? Really? It was like I was watching some shitty soap opera play out, but this was my life. I stared at the pictures of them together, her leaning into him, all smiles, looking like she didn't have a care in the world. Like I didn't even exist. Marcus laid out the details, how she started going to the gym after my diagnosis, claiming she needed to stay in shape to deal with the stress. Yeah, right. Turns out she'd been doing more than just working out. And they hadn't just been hooking up at the gym. She'd been going over to his apartment, too. Probably while I was stuck in bed, too weak to even get up. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to rage, to scream at the top of my lungs, but I couldn't. I just sat there, numb, staring at the proof of her second affair. It felt like my world was crashing down around me, piece by piece. But then Marcus hit me with the next bombshell. "There's more," he said, his voice steady. I looked up at him, confused. What more could there be? I was already dealing with Nathan, and now this Derek asshole. How much more could I take? Marcus pulled out another set of photos. This time it wasn't at a gym or some sleazy hotel. It was at a wedding. Our friend's wedding. The one we went to together, where we danced, laughed, and took pictures with everyone like we were the perfect couple. I remember that day so clearly. Adele looked stunning in her dress, and I felt lucky to have her by my side. Or at least I thought I was. In the photos, there was another man, this time a younger guy. He was the wedding photographer, some artsy-looking kid with a camera slung around his neck. His name was Oliver. I remember meeting him briefly that night, thinking nothing of it, just another guy doing his job. But apparently, he'd done a lot more than that. Marcus explained that the affair with Oliver started that night at the wedding. While I was mingling with friends, Adele had been cozying up to the photographer. They exchanged numbers, and soon enough, they were meeting up behind my back. How fucking bold, right? To hook up with some kid at a family event with everyone around us completely oblivious. I sat there, staring at the photos of them together, my stomach churning. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the humiliation. She didn't even bother trying to hide it. She was screwing someone who had been right there, in our circle in front of our friends. It made me feel like a fool. How could I have been so blind? Each new piece of information shattered me a little more. First Nathan, then Derek, and now Oliver. It wasn't just one mistake, one lapse in judgment. This was a pattern. Adele hadn't just betrayed me once. She'd done it over and over again, with different men, while I was going through the fight of my life. While I was focused on surviving, she was focused on satisfying herself. I felt like I couldn't breathe. The weight of it all was crushing me. I'd always been someone who tried to see the best in people, who believed that deep down we all have good intentions. But this was pure selfishness, pure deceit. I'd never felt so alone in my life. I sat in silence for a long time, trying to wrap my head around it all. Marcus didn't say much after that. There wasn't anything left to say. He'd done his job, uncovered the truth, and now it was up to me to figure out what to do with it. But I didn't know where to start. How do you move forward when your whole world has been torn apart? I thought back to all those times during chemo when I felt like I was on the verge of collapse. How I called out for Adele, how I'd begged for her to be there for me. And where was she? With Derek, with Oliver, with Nathan, anywhere but by my side. The realization hit me like a freight train. While I was clinging to life, she was out there, living hers as if I didn't matter. I'd been fighting for us, for our future, while she was busy screwing other men. It made me sick to my stomach. I wanted to hate her. God, I wanted to. But instead, all I felt was emptiness. Like something inside me had died. Maybe it had. Maybe the version of me who believed in love, in loyalty, in commitment, maybe that guy was gone for good. But one thing was clear. I couldn't just sit there and take it. I wasn't going to let her destroy me completely. I had to figure out my next move. Because this wasn't just about surviving cancer anymore. It was about surviving her betrayal. And I wasn't going to let her win. But deep down, I knew the battle was just beginning. There's a moment when you stop being the victim. When you decide you're not just going to take the hits anymore. When you realize it's time to hit back. After I found out about Adele's 3 fucking affairs, I knew that moment had come for me. I wasn't just some poor sap dying of cancer anymore. No, I was going to take control of my life again, of everything. And that's when I called Simon. Simon's been my friend since childhood. We grew up together, ran in the same circles, and stayed close even when life took us in different directions. Lucky for me, Simon became a lawyer, damn good one too. I knew if anyone could help me navigate this mess, it was him. When I called him and told him what was going on, he didn't hesitate. "We'll take care of this," he said, quietly. "She'll never see it coming." That's exactly what I needed. Something quiet, strategic. No big confrontations, no drama. I didn't want Adele to have time to react, to play any of her games. I wanted everything to be done behind the scenes, so by the time she realized what was happening, it'd be too late. Simon and I met up the next day. We grabbed coffee at some out-of-the-way cafe, somewhere Adele would never think to look. I laid it all out for him. Nathan, Derek, Oliver. The fucking trifecta of betrayal. Simon didn't flinch. He'd seen worse, he said. But to me, this was as bad as it got. The woman I married, the one who vowed to be with me through sickness and health, had been out screwing around while I was fighting cancer. I couldn't wrap my head around it. Maybe I never will. "Here's what we're going to do," Simon said, laying out his plan. "We'll start by transferring the ownership of your assets. The house, the cars, everything. She doesn't need to know what's happening until it's done. Can we even do that? I asked, feeling a bit lost in the legal jargon. Simon smirked. Elliot, she's been screwing around behind your back for months, maybe longer. You're sick, and she's neglected you. The courts will take your side if it comes to that. But let's not wait for her to fight back. We'll make sure you're in control before she even knows what's happening. I trusted Simon completely, and from that moment on, things were set in motion. I started quietly gathering all the documents. Everything with both of our names on it. The mortgage, the car titles, the investments we'd made over the years. Adele was blissfully unaware of the storm brewing just beneath the surface. She was still busy with her late nights and work meetings, completely oblivious to the fact that I was preparing to pull the rug out from under her. The legal process wasn't easy, though. I wasn't in the best shape, physically or emotionally. The chemo had taken a toll, and so had the mental anguish of finding out about her betrayal. Some days, I didn't know if I had the strength to get out of bed, let alone handle the logistics of transferring assets and preparing for divorce. But Simon kept me focused. He was a rock, reminding me why I was doing this. You need to protect yourself, Elliot. Don't let her take everything. She doesn't deserve it. The hardest part of all this? Pretending like nothing was wrong. Every day, I had to sit across from Adele, watch her go about her life like she hadn't shattered mine. There were times when she'd sit next to me on the couch, scrolling through her phone, probably texting one of those assholes, and I had to stop myself from grabbing the phone out of her hand and throwing it across the room. But I couldn't let her know I was on to her. Not yet. I remember one night in particular. I was lying in bed pretending to be asleep while she came home late again. She slipped into bed next to me, and I could smell the faint scent of cologne on her. Not mine, obviously. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with images of her with them. I wanted to scream, to throw her out right then and there, but I couldn't. I had to stay focused, stay calm. I couldn't give her the upper hand. Throughout this whole process, I found unexpected support from someone else. Emily. We'd known each other for a few years, part of the same circle of friends, but we'd never been particularly close. That changed when she found out what I was going through. Emily had been through something similar. Her husband cheated on her a few years back, and their divorce had been messy, brutal. But she came out stronger on the other side, and she was there for me when I needed someone to talk to. Emily didn't pull any punches. She wasn't the kind of person who'd tell me to be strong or stay positive. No, she told me to get angry. She told me to stop feeling sorry for myself and start thinking about what I wanted. Don't let her take everything from you, Elliot, she said one night over drinks. You've already lost so much. Take back what's yours. It was her words that gave me the strength to keep going. Some days, I'd sit in my lawyer's office with Simon, feeling like I was going to collapse under the weight of it all. But then I'd remember what Emily said. I'd remember the look on Adele's face when she came home late, thinking she was fooling me, thinking I didn't know. And that's what kept me moving forward. I worked with Simon to make sure everything was airtight. He helped me transfer the house into my name, move the savings into a separate account, even change the beneficiaries on my life insurance. Every step felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Adele was none the wiser. I played my part well, acting like the sick, clueless husband, while behind the scenes, I was pulling every string I could to secure my future. Finally, it all came together. Simon had everything in place, and I was ready to file for divorce. We decided that the best time to hit her with the papers was when she least expected it. No warning, no drawn-out arguments. Just one swift, clean cut. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't nervous. Even after everything she'd done, part of me still clung to the woman I thought I knew. The woman I loved. But that woman was long gone. And it was time I accepted that. When I looked at myself in the mirror the morning I planned to serve the papers, I saw someone different. Stronger. Colder maybe. But definitely not the man I used to be. Cancer had taken so much from me, my health, my peace of mind, but Adele had taken more. And I was about to take it all back. I didn't feel good about it. I didn't feel triumphant. If anything, I felt hollow. But I knew this was the only way. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about survival. And I was done letting her destroy me. The papers were served that afternoon. Adele was out when the process server came. and I knew she'd be blindsided. She'd walk in, probably expecting another night of lies and secrets, only to find her whole world upended, just like she'd done to mine. There's something darkly poetic about how life twists and turns. Here I was on the other side of chemotherapy, starting to get my strength back. My hair was coming in again, my appetite was returning, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I could see the faintest glimmer of normalcy. But as I was recovering, Adele was the one falling apart. It started subtly at first. I remember the way she'd complain about headaches, stomach pains, little things that I honestly couldn't bring myself to care about. I mean, after everything I'd been through, the months of chemo, the physical and emotional hell I endured, her whining about being tired or feeling off barely registered with me. I brushed it off. Hell, she didn't care when I was throwing up in the middle of the night from the chemo. Why should I care now? But it kept getting worse. She'd stay in bed longer, moaning about how she felt like shit, how she couldn't keep food down. Part of me wondered if it was guilt finally eating away at her. You'd think someone who betrayed their spouse so thoroughly would at least feel something. Maybe the weight of her actions finally caught up to her. Or so I thought. It wasn't long before I found out the real reason. One night, after she'd been complaining about the flu for weeks, she broke down and told me the truth. I still remember how it went down. We were sitting at the dinner table. Not that either of us ate together much anymore. And she just started crying out of nowhere. It was the first time in months I'd seen any real emotion from her. And for a second, I almost felt sorry for her. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice shaky, her hands trembling as she wiped away her tears. I just stared at her, waiting. "I've been sick. I went to the doctor, and they found something." I didn't even blink. "Found what?" I asked, my tone flat, cold. I'd long stopped caring about her well-being. Her next words hit like a ton of bricks, not because I cared, but because of the sheer irony of it all. "I have an STD. I got it from one of them." She didn't say who. She didn't need to. I already knew it didn't matter. Nathan Derek Oliver. One of her lovers had given her a parting gift, and now she was dealing with the consequences of her reckless, disgusting choices. I could barely contain the bitter laugh that crept up my throat. She was sitting there, crying, pleading for sympathy, and all I could think was, this is fucking karma. While I was battling cancer, fighting for my life, she was out there screwing around with God knows how many men. Now, as I was finally getting better, she was the one deteriorating. It was poetic justice. Turns out, the infection wasn't something that could be easily treated. It had spread, causing all kinds of complications, and her treatment was going to be long and painful. She didn't say it outright, but I knew she was terrified. For once, she was facing something she couldn't just run away from or fuck her way out of. After she confessed, there was this moment where she looked at me, expecting something, comfort, reassurance, anything. But I just sat there, staring at her, completely detached. "I'm sorry, Elliot," she whispered through her tears. "I made a mistake. Please, let's try to work this out." That's when I knew it was time. Time to end this nightmare once and for all. I leaned forward, looked her dead in the eyes, and said, "It's too late for that, Adele." I reached into my bag and pulled out the stack of papers I've been carrying around for days. The divorce papers, the evidence, everything. I slapped them down on the table in front of her, watching as her eyes widened in shock. "What is this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "That," I said, my voice cold and steady, "is your reality now. I know about Nathan. I know about Derek. I know about Oliver. I know about every single lie, every time you snuck out while I was sick, every time you fucked someone else while I was in a hospital bed. And now it's over. Everything we owned is mine. The house, the money, all of it. You signed away your rights to it, and you didn't even realize it." She sat there, stunned, her face draining of color as the weight of my words sank in. "But how?" she stammered, flipping through the papers, realizing that I had been one step ahead of her this whole time. I felt nothing but a cold sense of satisfaction as I watched her crumble. This was my victory, my revenge. I had taken back control of my life, of everything. She was powerless, and for the first time in months, I was the one holding all the cards. She tried to plead with me, of course. "Elliot, please." I was confused. "I made mistakes, but I love you. We can fix this. I'll go to therapy. I'll do whatever it takes. I didn't even flinch. Love? You don't know the first thing about love, Adele. If you did, you wouldn't have done what you did. You threw it all away, and now you have to live with the consequences. Her pleas got louder, more desperate. She begged me to reconsider, to give her another chance, but I'd heard enough. I stood up from the table, looked at her one last time, and said, "You're on your own now, just like I was." And with that, I walked away. You'd think that moment would have felt more triumphant, that I'd feel some overwhelming sense of satisfaction after everything she put me through. But the truth is I didn't. Sure, there was a cold sense of justice in seeing her fall apart, in knowing she was going to suffer for what she'd done. But it didn't fix the damage she caused. It didn't erase the months of pain, the betrayal, the humiliation. It didn't heal the scars she left on my heart, on my mind. In the end, I didn't feel like I'd won anything. I'd taken back what was mine, sure, but no amount of revenge could undo the past. The wounds were still there, raw and deep. Maybe they always would be. Adele was out of my life now. Legally, financially, emotionally, I was free of her. But the price I'd paid for that freedom? It was steep, and as much as I wanted to feel like I'd come out on top, part of me knew I'd never truly get back what I'd lost. The cancer may have been gone, but the damage Adele had done? That was a whole different kind of disease, one I wasn't sure I'd ever recover from. After the divorce, I didn't feel the freedom I expected. It wasn't like breaking out of a cage. It was more like standing in a wasteland, wondering what the hell was next. Once Adele was gone, all I had left was time and a mess of emotions I didn't know how to process. So I did the smart thing, I got help. That's when Sophie came into my life. She was my therapist at first, helping me through post-cancer rehab. I didn't just need physical recovery. The emotional scars Adele left ran deep. Sophie helped me sort through the wreckage, listening as I unloaded my anger, my pain, everything I had bottled up for months. She never judged, just guided me through it. What started as professional slowly became something else. It wasn't overnight, but one day I realized I wasn't just looking forward to our sessions because they were helping me. I looked forward to seeing her. We both hesitated, knowing the boundaries, but eventually we crossed them. She stopped being my therapist, and soon after, she became more than a friend. With Sophie, everything was different. No lies, no games, just honesty. She saw me at my lowest and didn't run. We didn't have that wild passion I'd had with Adele in the early years, but what we had was deeper, real. Slowly, we started talking about a future, one far away from the past that had dragged me down. We made the decision to leave, a fresh start in a new country. I needed to escape the memories, the places that held too much pain, and Sophie was on board. So, we moved to a small coastal town. Nothing fancy, just quiet, peaceful. A place where we could rebuild, far from the wreckage of our old lives. The move wasn't just a change of scenery. It was a clean slate. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. Sophie and I spent our days settling in, enjoying the quiet, making a new life together. It wasn't flashy or exciting, but it was ours. I still think about Adele sometimes, about how her betrayal broke me, but also how it led me here. It forced me to reevaluate everything. I wouldn't be with Sophie now if it hadn't happened. Do I forgive Adele? Maybe in some ways. I've let go of the anger, but the scars are still there. I can't forget what she did, but I don't let it control me anymore. Sophie and I talk about the future. Nothing extravagant, just a quiet life. Maybe a dog, maybe a garden. I don't need much anymore, just peace. And I've found that with her. Adele's betrayal may have destroyed the life I thought I wanted, but it gave me the chance to build something real, something better. I've finally found happiness. And for the first time in a long time, I'm at peace.